Jeni me edicionin e kësaj jave të emisionit Argument Plus, në të cilin fakt do të zhvillojmë një intervistë dhe do të flasim për disa prej çështjeve më aktuale të ditëve të fundit dhe disa prej çështjeve të reklamuara tashmë si prioritete të qeverisë Kurti, por të disa qeverive në vazhdimsi për shkak se janë pjesë e një orientimi strategjik që ka Kosova e që quhet integrimet evropiane. Këto tema do t'i trajtojmë me shefën e Zyres së BE-s në Kosovë, zonën Nataliya Apostolova. Welcome to our studios.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, you've met some of the new ministers, you've met our new prime minister, we have a government at last. What were the topics discussed? What is the message that you got from the meetings?
Indeed, after nearly 100 days, after the elections, Kosovo already can congratulate itself with a new government. That was a long-expected move, I think, not only from us, the internationals, because we are the so-called outsiders, but I think that the expectation of Kosovo population at last was met, because they voted for a change, they want to see this change implemented now. So after the government already was elected and voted in the assembly, I met indeed the Prime Minister and some of the ministers. We decided to arrange these meetings according to our priorities in Kosovo, okay, because it's quite a big government, although much smaller than the previous one, about which we are very, very happy. So I discussed with Prime Minister Kurti and my team what are the priorities which we see for the next, let's say, months in Kosovo. We discussed, of course, the importance of Stabilization and Association Agreement, the European reform agenda, and what are our priorities in these next months. No need to say that rule of law is the basis for everything, and we want to see it in all its multi-aspects. We also want to see improvement and fast-track in education reform, because this is the investment in Kosovo future. We also want to see developments which are related to economy, to well-being, but because of that we have to look as well at the decision of the government about the 100% tax, which is imposed on Serbian, Bosnia and Herzegovina goods, and how this is going to be tackled. And of course we are going to be much more involved in judiciary, where we are expecting to have a big reform project starting just now from April, and many, many other spheres of life, of course, but these are the main and very urgent priorities. I cannot not mention public administration reform, because this, as you may know, is our biggest let's say financial support for Kosovo, which is the budget support. And we would like to see how this reform now is going to be tackled, because now we see that this very important portfolio is merged with another one, Ministry of Internal Affairs and Public Administration. So I discussed yesterday with Minister Agin Veliu how this is going to be tackled only on the 8th day of his being in office. But nevertheless, my general impression from everyone I met so far is that there is big consideration, decisiveness and sense of responsibility, because this joint coalition, actually these two parties together with the non-majority communities, but as well Srpska Lista, who have two ministers participating in this government, have a very, very strong challenge at the moment, because a lot of reforms have been delayed. A lot of processes, in a way, are put on a standby. Even let's look at the budget. The budget has to be discussed very soon, because otherwise the country may go in a very deep crisis. So they realize this responsibility. I see as well clear view, at least in some of the ministers already, like the Minister of Finance, who was quite explicit in my meeting with him. So let's say that we have very positive impressions.
Okay, and we'll start breaking down some of the issues. You mentioned Stabilization Association Agreement and the European Reform Agenda. We are talking about now something called European Reform Agenda 2, ERA 2, because ERA 1 basically was not implemented in time by the previous government. Do you have a commitment, or are there deadlines to, let's say, raise the level of SAA implementation in Kosovo?
Stabilization and Association Agreement is our contractual relationship between Kosovo and the European Union, and it's extremely important document of 300 pages with a lot of measures inside, but this is the basis of the relationship not only of Kosovo and the EU, but all countries which have chosen the European path. They need to have this contractual relationship. So it is extremely important that we have the SAA, although 5 of our member states have chosen to have a status neutral at that specific agreement. And in order to make it easier for Kosovo to implement the most important from these measures, we have created the European Reform Agenda, which is a small window or a mirror, let's say it, of these most urgent and important columns where the development should go. There were certain delays, you are right, in the implementation of ERA. That's why we called it ERA 1. And now we are looking into a restart of all these measures which still need to be implemented. I wouldn't call it yet ERA 2 because we really have to discuss and to see how we are going to format these measures. But my message to the government is, and it has been, think very carefully what kind of commitment you take. Because once they are already agreed between us and Kosovo institutions, then starts the countdown, which of these measures are implemented, how, and in what time frame. So it's very important to be rational and to be realistic of what Kosovo could do in, let's say, a period of 12 months or 18 months. And I'm very happy that I got understanding about that and full agreement from the Minister of European Integration, whom I met, and actually we spoke with one and the same way about this.
And if SAA is, as you said, it's a contractual agreement between Kosovo and EU, a large help economic-wise is supposed to come from the IPA funds. And the European Union continues to be one of the biggest donors in Kosovo in general and in Kosovo economy as well. We're about to enter IPA 3 period. Do you consider this government to be ready? Are there any concrete projects in mind that are supposed to be, or can we wait to be implemented?
The instrument for pre-accession, IPA, is actually the assistance which the European Commission grants to the countries which have chosen the European perspective. Actually, the European Union is the biggest investor and trade partner in Kosovo, and I want to underline that. Of course, we are spending European taxpayers' money, but still we are the biggest partner here, and as well together with our member states who have a separate portfolio which they spend bilaterally. So if we have something like 100 million euros, which we are spending as EU, then another around 30 to 50 million are spent by our member states. So if you look at that portfolio for Kosovo and for Kosovo population, it's tremendous. The assistance which the EU and its member states grants to and brings here in Kosovo is the second biggest in the world after Palestine. So I think all this needs to be very well realized by the new government because there is such a big offer at the table. What is needed is this government and the different ministries to be able really to implement it and to take it.
So would it be too cynical if I would say that the money is there, but we did not write enough projects to get it?
It's not that simple because the work only starts with writing a project or agreeing on certain project. More important is the implementation of this project. As you know, our assistance doesn't come as a grant, or if it comes as a grant, there is a big part of the assistance which comes, of course, with conditionalities. And these conditionalities are very serious ones. We want to see a democratic way of development of this place. We want to see a democratic way of development of the institutions. We want to see transparent way of how our money are used. We want to see public procurement, which is according to European standards, and many other criteria which, if Kosovo institutions do not meet or the project is not implemented in this way, then the money are suspended. And you may remember that we suspended some of our assistance, for example, time ago, when it was about certain, let's say, tenders about which we were not quite sure that they meet the European standards, especially in north of Kosovo. But as you said, the money are there. They are very generous. IPA 3, about which you mentioned, is going to be a bit different from the way how we have been spending money until now. Because until now, the assistance which we were giving to each of the 6 partners in the Western Balkans was dedicated to each of the countries. Now, in IPA 3, we are going to have one common basket for the whole region. And then, depending on the ways how the projects are developed and how mature they are, the money will be granted, which comes even more important for Kosovo to have this public administration and these people who can prepare really mature and well-prepared projects in order the money to come here.
Okay, you mentioned the rule of law as your utmost priority, and the Prime Minister in his first speech when addressing the Parliament and the nation mentioned vetting to be concluded in the 24 months with him being in the office, and everyone has been actually mentioning it as a priority ever since the election campaign started. Where does EU stand on these issues and these deadlines, I must ask?
Rule of law for us is the basis for everything. It's our cross-section priority. And it's actually a priority not only here in Kosovo, it's everywhere in the other partnership agreements which we have with the other partners here. Why? Because if you remember the Western Balkan strategy, which was adopted by the previous Commission, exactly. There as well, the fundamentals was rule of law and how prepared is each one of the democracies to take up these challenges. So for us, rule of law is the priority. We look at it from many angles, not only the vetting. We look at it from the legislative package, which Kosovo has to have, actually a very stable legal basis for building the rule of law. Then we want to see the whole judiciary apparatus, the justice, let's say, institutions to be working independently in a very transparent way, and the ways how the people inside there who are selected should be done in a very transparent and very merit-based way. What I want to say in short is that we don't want to see political nepotism, and I think that this is essential. Because public administration as well as judiciary should be far away from politics. This is just a must. Otherwise, we cannot speak about rule of law. So now there will be a big challenge for the new government because as we saw and as we heard in their joint agreement, rule of law is actually the promise which they gave to the citizens of Kosovo. So now they have to see how they're going to implement it and how they're going to convince the people who voted for them that they really are bringing a change.
And when we speak about EU integration, it is always underlined as a priority, but in the last few years there's been a top priority, if I may use this word, or something that's been above, like hanging like a cloud above every political development in Kosovo, and that's the dialogue with Serbia, Pristina-Belgrade dialogue. And it is still conditioned by tariff, which is still in place. You mentioned that you discussed this with our Prime Minister, who stated that the tariff will be taken off and the reciprocity will enter in force.
Indeed, the tariff has been a big stumbling block for the dialogue since already a year and a half. And although with our hearts then we understood why this tariff was actually implemented by then government, it came immediately after Kosovo was rejected from its membership in Interpol. Also, there were several derecognitions coming one after another. So it was quite an emotional and sensitive moment. But nevertheless, although we can, as I said, with our hearts understand that now and even then, the tariff is an action which goes against international commitments already taken by Kosovo in different contracts like CEFTA, like SAA, and like other regional initiatives. So from the very first moment, we as EU, our hierarchy, our president, our commissioners, but as well a number of capitals through their ambassadors here, have stated that the tariff must go. The previous government was not at all open to discuss that, and that's why the dialogue was put on a standby already for a year and a half. Now the new government and also this coalition LDK-VV, even in their agreement, again stated that the dialogue is a priority and that the tariff has to go because indeed it's contrary to commitments which are international for Kosovo. But at the same time they are speaking about some kind of measures which is called reciprocity and about which we at the moment have no clarity. So my message again to the government and to the Prime Minister and to these who feel responsible for the future of Kosovo through normalization of relations with Serbia, of course, is that this tariff should go. And I think that the voice of many internationals has been raised these days about this tariff. And now is the moment the government really to sit and to think how they're going to do it.
And when you say you have no clarity what reciprocity means, because I understand that Prime Minister might not put everything in media, but if he is not able to clarify it to you or to give details to you and the meetings of let's say high level, then do you say there is no clear idea? You actually, if something is put in force, you won't know what it is?
Well, actually, we have never had a meeting specifically
regarding
on that.
I understand that, it's early stages.
Our message has been always the tariff should go, but at least what we hear from the government at the moment is that they need some time in order to discuss and to, let's say, put in details what exactly they have in time.
Okay, and there has been talk, I think High Commissioner Borrell even mentioned it, that talk of appointment of a special EU representative for dialogue. Does this change the EU's vision as to how the process should continue or how it should be concluded?
I don't think it changes the position of the EU. Actually, if you look at the part of our strategic partners, the US, they have even two persons who are assigned to stir, in a way, this process. On our side, it would be normal, and our High Representative, when visiting Kosovo in an interview, but also in many statements, he said that he really feels very much dedicated to the Western Balkan region and specifically to the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. He thinks, but this is an idea which is still developed, so I cannot predict how exactly this is going to be formulated, but in principle he would like to have an envoy or a person who will be dealing only with the dialogue, which means that this process will be energized. And I think that this is very positive, because if you look the timing, quite long time passed until the technical agreements were implemented to a certain extent. And the people on both sides want to see a change. They want to see a final agreement. They want to see end game in this process. So in order to do that, you really have to have dedicated people who have 100% of their work and mandate, which is exactly on that. So if you ask my personal opinion, I think that this is a positive idea.
And you mentioned, when I said about the changing of EU's position, you mentioned that US has already appointed special envoys, and this, whether it changes the way the dialogue is intermediated or facilitated, constant US involvement?
No, it cannot change the way how it is facilitated, the dialogue, because the EU, the HRVP, no matter who is the personality, is mandated to do this facilitation by the UN General Assembly. So from there on, how the modalities of this facilitation are going on depends on the different stages. Our strategic partners, US, have always been part of this discussion, even not sitting at the table. They always are, of course, informed, and they are an important part. They always have this kind of supporting track, which is important for us as well. we went through certain stages when the commission was formed, when still the commissioners had not distributed the portfolios. Of course, then our strategic partners were more active, it's normal.
Yes.
Now we have already the High Representative who is fully dedicated to the job. And I think that the roles are very clear, and whoever wants to support the track is welcome.
We have something called new methodology of enlargement that's been approved lately, and there are some changes. What would you, let's say, mark as key changes or issues to address regarding Brussels' stance towards Western Balkans?
Indeed, the new methodology is a Commission document. It has been produced very recently, and now it goes to the member states, who of course are going to look at it and they have to agree on it. The new methodology, very shortly, is a tool which is going to make this process more credible, but as well more energetic and dynamic. As well, the process is going to be more, let's say, having more political dedication, because through the new methodology, the process of association, accession, is going to go through a lot of summits on political level. Member states are going to be very much involved. There are several issues which are extremely important, and I want to underline that for Kosovo this is very important as well. The different chapters, so to say, or policies are clustered. And one of these clusters is the so-called fundamentals, which is rule of law, human rights. So in the new methodology, what is expected is the fundamentals are going to be always there. So you can open chapters and close chapters, but there will be always cross-checking vis-a-vis the fundamentals. And I think that this is very healthy, because we should not go only in technical discussions. We always have to have in mind, as I said, rule of law, which is cross-section.
Does this mean that the enlargement strategy that was approved in, I think, February 2018, so it's just 2 years ago, it failed when it comes to countries of Western Balkans? Because when it was approved, as I remember, it gave even concrete deadlines for Serbia and Montenegro. And we have this new methodology now in place?
I wouldn't say it has failed, because they have different, let's say, scopes and spheres of influence, so to say. The Western Balkan strategy gave a clear perspective for the 6 partners, and it brought at the table 6 flagship initiatives, which gave and served as a tool for each one of the partners to change the pace of their accession. So if you more implement these flagship initiatives, you can change your place into this run. The methodology has different focus, and the methodology is more oriented to us inside as well, the European Union, because we also have to take some commitments or change our stand in order to make this process credible. I would say that these 2 strategies complement each other. But let's wait and see first the new methodology to go through the discussion with member states.
And one other thing I keep insisting whenever there's EU integration at the table, do we march towards EU as a Western Balkan 6, or it's 6 countries not competing against each other but going on their own?
It has been stated so many times that I think that the answer is in your question as well. The region is approaching to the EU as a region, as a team, as 6 partners. So the more one of the partners implements a key or goes faster, it drags as well the others. And that's why it is so important to have this kind of team spirit between the Western Balkan 6. It's so important that the ideas, the developments, the reforms are actually with a spillover effect in the whole region. And because of that, each regional initiatives which are coming here, like for example CEFTA, or the Berlin process and its implementation further, whatever it will be. I
insisted on the same question because you mentioned that IPA 3 funds will now be regional and not country-focused.
But the assistance, the instrument for pre-accession actually is a financial assistance for reforms. So, for example, if Kosovo and Albania want to come with a common project which is valid and comes and benefits both countries, then of course this regional project is going to be awarded by IPA 3 and then both countries are going to benefit from it. Or you can have a triple project if it is, for example, a border integrated border management or whatever. So I don't say that it's a competition, but when you have tenders and when you have a financial assistance which is granted always, you have competition even if you want between the beneficiaries.
And another reason why I insisted on whether it is seen as a region, as a whole, as Western Balkan 6, is this mini-Schengen, very famous issue, of course, regarding some integration processes between countries and the whole getting out of the proportion thing, even by media and by certain politicians, this must be said regarding the process as a whole. So are we talking about an integration of Western Balkan 6 among themselves, firstly, or is this parallel to European path?
First of all, I would like to stress how unfortunate is the fact that more and again people speak about this initiative as mini Schengen, because it is everything else but not a mini Schengen. And I think that it's important this to be clarified, because Schengen relates to visa liberalization, to the Schengen Code, to borders, and this initiative, which started from as an Albanian initiative, but many others from the region decided to join it, is actually a regional economic initiative. As I said, we as EU have always been supportive for economic initiatives in the region because we think that this is something which complements CEFTA or SAA. But what we want to see is all 6 partners participate in such initiatives. If it goes only to 2, 3 or 4 countries, then of course it goes against the logic and the essentials of regional integration. So in all these meetings, we as EU, as Commission, have been present, and we have been following the developments of this agreement quite closely. But again, I hope very much that all 6 partners are going to participate there. And even if someone like Kosovo did not agree with some, let's say, conditionalities, how they were invited, or only some part of the content was not okay for them, then Kosovo should sit at the table and be part of the discussion, even not agreeing on certain issues. But the fact of not being there and leaving an empty chair is, I don't think, quite, let's say, wise on behalf of Kosovo, because then you are using an opportunity, your voice to be heard.
The stance is that it is not some issues that Kosovo does not agree, but it is not recognized as part of the process as long as its borders and its status is not recognized or treated as equal by all the states.
Even this position has to be vocalized, and it is much better to defend it rather than not participate.
And I'll insist on the second part of the questions once more. Is this something that is a prelude, a must, in order to fast-track the European path, or we're talking about parallel processes?
No, I'm speaking, and we consider it as any other initiative which can, in principle, stir the process of further accession.
Now, when we talk about regional initiatives, another issue that also is not regional, actually, it's quite domestic and very much a focus is, of course, visa liberalization. We have to talk about it. And there's been a lot of talk. We have had many government cabinets promising and failing on it. But I want to underline what you said about the new methodology. You said that it is more up to the countries involved and it's not just technical process. So we can go back to cross-checking. It has been said by our institutions that the technical part has been done and fulfilled as such. So it's just political will and decision now. Is it such?
Kosovo, in its visa liberalization roadmap, had 95 criteria which needed to be fulfilled, and they are already met. Everybody has said that. I mean, everybody on the side of Commission, European Parliament, not once, several times already. What has been done is done, and we should commend Kosovo for this work, which is really very, very big work, and I know it well because my office here is monitoring what you're doing and we provide the reports. So it's a huge, huge work done. Now, one thing is very important. This work should not be take it for granted and we stop to maintain it. All this is a process. As you can imagine, fight against corruption, organized crime doesn't stop with the day when you have ticked the box that this number of cases have been, for example, closed. Or from the monitoring of cases, so many has gone from investigation to the court. So this process needs to be maintained. And it's extremely important because if one day the Commission, asked by some of the member states, needs to perform a revision, a check, an assessment, if this is the case, as by the way, we already did, then this process should show the same result, that the process is maintained. But on the other side, you are right, the technical conditions are met, and now we are in the process where the conclusion of that decision is taken, which goes through the Council. The member states have to decide. And I hope very much, because listening to the Croatian ambassador, who is holding now the presidency in the EU Council, they have very ambitious projects. And of course, they want to see this, this process going further. Let's not forget that we have as well Germany coming after Croatia, and Germany as well is a big supporter for visa liberalization. No need to mention just the visit of the Italian foreign minister, who also stated that they support very much the visa liberalization. So the process is ongoing. It has to be tabled in the Council, and member states have to take the final decision.
So I'm not going to ask you about dates as I do with Kosovo politicians. I'm just going to ask about the key events upcoming. Croatian presidency is quite big on the summit coming up in Zagreb, but can we just put dates into a calendar? When will the next meetings take place, or when do we expect this issue to be on the table?
Actually, Zagreb summit will be more decision for opening of negotiations of North Macedonia and Albania. This is actually the expectation, and I would say that it's a milestone for that. Visa liberalization and the way how it is discussed in the Council format is a bit different. Normally, the presidency has to table this discussion in certain formats, and then they have to decide when some kind of a vote, because it's taken by 2/3 majority, is going to be scheduled. We are not at all in a position to give dates about that. It depends on so many other policies, because you have to understand that these formats are dealing not only with an issue like visa liberalization. Actually, these same formats are dealing with all the policies of the EU and above in the external relations. So I would not like to give dates, and I think it's very important not to give dates, because the desperation and the destroying of this good idea, visa liberalization, was actually done because of false promises. And when these are processes which do not depend only on Kosovo, but as well on procedures which are between 27 member states, then we have to be very careful how we manage these expectations.
And when you said that the technical criteria has been fulfilled, the boxes have been ticked, but it has to be maintained, does this mean that there will be no revision? You will just, there will be no additional reports regarding technical criteria that will be asked from you?
Actually, especially on the last criteria, which is the fight against corruption, organized crime, we are doing the monitoring every month.
I know.
We have, through the Ministry of European Integration, with the help of all the ministries and agencies which are involved in that, including courts, judiciary, prosecution, providing information to our Commission, DG Home, so that this information is always there. If there is a member state, or let's say number of member states, who would like to be reassured what is the status quo, the Commission has this information and always can provide the report.
And lastly, but you've mentioned something in the beginning that I would like to also go through. You said the public administration reform is something you invest a lot. We have had, there's been a lot of noise in the media regarding the Young Cell scheme, that students that were funded by EU in their studies and they did not, they were not employed by the government. Anything concrete on that, or did you? You said the government is now smaller. Is there commitment to actually bring it to standards that are required by EU?
First of all, it's very good that the government is smaller. Of course, it's a challenge because you have to have now ministries and public administration structures which have to merge. So this is going to be a challenge in front of the new government and ministries, but they are dealing with it. More important is the fact that there has been a commitment. There will be not so many and such numbers of deputy ministers, which existed before. So there was one apparatus of senior management which was, let's say, questionable what kind of value added they brought to the whole process, but at the same time they were extremely expensive.
Very diplomatically put, I must admit.
So now we are looking into a new government which is quite smaller in number, and where obviously the public administration reform will go, I hope, smoother. The public administration reform started. We are budgeting it with direct budget support. It's not easy. We started with several laws, which at the moment, some of them are put on standby because there were requests against them. Obviously, the new government has to take a decision, do they want to amend them and how. I have already offered our support with expertise about that, but at least the reform has started. And the Young Cell scheme indeed is one very, very useful tool, which I'm happy to say that in 2 or 3 of the meetings which I already had, the senior advisors who were sitting next to the ministers were Young Cell scheme laureates. So what my office has done, we have provided all the contact details and of course the names of these people who we have trained, and we would like to see them bring Kosovo in its further European future.
Something else that's big in Brussels, and especially now, is the so-called Green New Deal. There's a lot of effort and money being put into environment. The air pollution was not as big, perhaps because we had, let's say, winter was not so harsh. The weather was good, and we did not feel it. But I know there are new power plants. There's a new filters. There's a project for that, and other projects that, let's say, target the environment in Kosovo, and it's something that I also must ask as a priority. Where does it stand?
Indeed, the Green Deal is actually the new priority of our Commission, the new Commission for the next 5 years. It's extremely ambitious and very important priority, which is not going to be priority per se, but it has spillover effect on all other priorities. So everything what we have been doing now is looked through this Green Deal. And of course it's normal because we live and we see what is happening in the world. There are a lot of challenges, not only demographic but environmental. So Europe has to be the first actually continent which is going to make this its first priority. What we did in Kosovo, I think it's very important. Kosovo B is going to be equipped in the next first year and then a second 24 months with 2 filters, which cost something around 76 million euros, and which are going to diminish the pollution which is produced with these NO gases by 35%, which makes a real difference of the environment, but not only in Pristina, because as our High Representative who was here and who actually in a ceremony inaugurated this filter said, the pollution doesn't have boundaries and it doesn't have a roof. So when you pollute here, of course it goes all over the region. And this is very important. But this is not the only thing what we are going and what we are doing. You know maybe that the district heating in Pristina is also our project. The Clean Water 24/7 is also our project. We started a pioneer project on biomass in Jakova, which is very important and which is going to be something totally new for the whole region. So we have a number of projects which are in this pipeline and who are targeting environment, and this is all because the assistance which the EU is providing elsewhere is very social. That's the first priority which we want to see.
And these projects, as well as political situation, will keep you busy, which is why I'm especially grateful you took our time to be in our studios. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shikues të nderuarme, zoni Nataliya Apostolova, biseduam për disa prej çështjeve aktuale që kanë bënë me integrimin evropian të Kosovës në kohën kur kemi një qeveri të re, ministra të cilët ende janë duke i marrë disa prej detyrave dhe duke i caktuar disa prej prioriteteve në kohën kur nuk kemi program qeveritar, por kemi një, orientim strategjik të Kosovës drejt bashkimit evropian. Ju falenderoj për vëmendjen, ne shihemi në emisionet tona tjera.